Welcome everybody to our GEC Masterclass. It's a great pleasure to have you come on this journey with us. So what are we doing here? Why are we here? Our aim is that we hope to generate interest in you in terms of attending the program. That's if you have not been a participant on the GEC program. If you have attended the program, we are hoping that you will gain greater fluency in terms of recommending the program to other students. These may be colleagues or friends within your circle. Recommend the GEC program for them to attend and also gain the knowledges that you have acquired through being a student on the journey. Once again, greetings everybody, and welcome to our masterclass. For those who are not familiar with me, my name is Vuyisa Mamanzi. I work at the Center for Sexuality, AIDS and Gender, based in Pretoria at the University of Pretoria. My background is in anthropology. I'm both a researcher and a project manager here at the center. I also form part of the subject matter experts who helped designed and created the content for this GEC program. And I have to say, I'm super excited to be here with you and looking forward to a robust discussion and rich engagement. On the screen, you will see that we do have the online platform etiquette. So, I mean, before we engage, we all need to have rules of engagement. And our first rule is that please mute your microphone so that there is no background noise. If you want to speak during the presentation or the engagement, please use the chat box or the raise hand function. Lastly, please note that the session is being recorded. So I've already noted in terms of why it is that we are here today. And now I would like to just quickly go over the structure of the masterclass. It is divided into 3 sessions. The first activity that we are going to explore is why do gender equity and equality matter today? You know, oftentimes we use these big concepts without deeply grasping the deeper meaning of these concepts and without clearly understanding how do we utilize these concepts in our daily life. So we want to start with clarifying and defining why do gender equity and equality matter today, because in the GEC programs, these 2 concepts are key in terms of how we do our work within our organizations. The second activity that we are going to look at is what are the interventions that have been implemented in terms of gender equality. So we will look at the scope of the problem. What is the situation right now when it comes to gender equity and gender equality? And then we move and speak about, so what have people done? What progress has been made? Has these interventions been successful? Lastly, we give you a holistic view of the GEC program and what it is that we offer. I'm really happy to see that we do have our alumni joining us today as well. Next slide. Thank you. So why do gender equity and equality matter today? Okay, so we are going to start with an exercise, an activity. This is an anonymous poll, and we will be responding to 4 statements. You are more than welcome to choose more than one response. So the first statement states that there is sufficient attention paid. Thank you, Cedric, for putting up the poll. So the first statement reads, there is sufficient attention paid to addressing gender equality and gender equity. Second statement, there is insufficient attention paid to addressing gender equality and gender equity. I am not, third statement, I am not sure of the difference between gender equality and gender equity. Lastly, addressing gender equality is a peripheral issue in most organizations. You may go ahead and choose your responses. So we've all responded to the poll, and I do see here that 46% selected that you feel that there is sufficient attention paid to addressing gender equality and equity. 38% feel that there is insufficient attention paid to addressing gender equity and equality. 4% stated that they're not sure of the difference between gender equality and equity, and 38% feel that addressing gender equality is a peripheral issues in some organizations. Look, I'm really happy to see that people feel that there is sufficient attention being paid to gender equality, equity. But I think what's also most interesting is the number of responses that we have when we speak about viewing gender, addressing gender, or viewing gender equality as a peripheral issue in most organizations. I know that in the work that we do, we often sometimes get comments of this nature. And I honestly believe that as a change maker, it's really important for us to call things by the name and to be honest about where we are currently. And indeed, in some organizations, gender equality work is not seen as important work. Hence, we have programs such as the GEC, to educate ourselves, to broaden our knowledge in terms of what still needs to be done, studying the climate and understanding what's really happening on the ground when it comes to gender equality and equity. So thank you so much to everyone who responded to those questions. So what we are going to do now is to look at the scope of the problem, having a look at some facts and figures in terms of where we are when looking at gender equality, right? We also then delve deep into how do gender equity and gender equality differ. So when we're talking about gender equality, here we are looking at the means to equal outcomes for both women, men, and gender diverse people. And I think the key word there is equal outcomes. And then when we speak of gender equity, we are talking about the process to achieve gender equality. What does this mean? We are unable to achieve gender equality if we have not dealt with the process. So gender equity is the how. So if we want to reach gender equality, we need to think critically about how we are going to do it. And gender equity is the how. So if we are saying that gender equality means equal outcomes for women, men, and gender diverse people, do we have structures in place that will allow us to reach this gender equality? Is our workplace or organization conducive for us to achieve gender equality? Are we inclusive in our practice within our organizations to reach gender equality? Does the environment allow women, men, and gender diverse people to thrive in their daily responsibilities within their organizations, right? So this is what we mean, setting up a gender equity so that we can be able to progress in terms of reaching gender equality. So gender equity is the how, and gender equality is where we want to see ourselves in terms of doing the work of gender with gender change within our organizations. Additionally, gender equity recognizes that women and gender diverse people are not in the same starting position as men. And I think this is very important point to also take a note on, that as human beings, we are not only just one thing, and that the positionalities that we hold says a lot in terms of our ability to progress in life, as well as to progress within our organizations. Also, this speaks a lot to how power is distributed within the organization, and also asking questions of, in my organization, who has power? The people who have power, what do they look like? How is this power distributed within my organization? And of course, we can't talk about power without talking about privilege. And sometimes we need to be honest and reflect on our positionalities. Ask yourself, how much power do you have? How much privilege do you possess? Because if you're going to have an honest conversation in one way or the other, we all hold a certain level of power. We all hold a certain level of privilege. And this is because of historical and social disadvantages on certain bodies. Thank you, Cedric. So I'm just going to quickly go through this slide, and here we're really looking at the numbers, the figures. So it says here that 68.4%, this is the global gender gap score in 2023 for all 146 countries. So 146 countries in terms of their global gender score, we were sitting at 68.4%. Additionally, out of 145 countries covered in both the 2022 and 2023, the overall score changed from 68.1% to 68.4%, an improvement of 0.3 percentage points. We know that when we're doing gender work, it's not easy work. It's a journey. It's difficult. Oftentimes progress is really slow, but it's also important that in doing the work, we recognize and celebrate whatever progress is made on the journey of achieving or accelerating in us achieving gender equality within our organizations. So the level of progress toward gender parity. Here we're talking about the parity score for each indicator is calculated as the ratio of the value of each indicator for women to the value for men. A parity score of 1 indicates full parity, that we've achieved gender equality, and that the gender gap is the distance from a full parity. I hope that's clear. Next slide. So when we are considering the 102 countries covered continuously from 2006 till 2023, the gap is again 68.6% in 2023, recovering to the level reported in the 2020 edition and advancing by a modest 4.1 percentage points since the first edition of the report in 2006. Again, I would have loved to see a greater percentage in terms of our progress since 2006, but I do appreciate that there was an improvement, and these statistics are a testament, or they show us in terms of that a lot of work still needs to be done in achieving gender equality. We also should note that 131 years, it's going to take us 131 years for us to reach full parity, given the rate at which we are progressing in doing the work. I do see in the chat that Linda has written, she's asking if if just checking if the recording can be shared after the event. I may need to leave in a short while. Thanks, Linda. Okay, so let's look at some facts. So sub-Saharan Africa's parity score is the sixth highest among the 8 regions at 68.2%, ranking above Southern Asia and the Middle East and North Africa. Progress in the region has been uneven when looking at Namibia, Rwanda, and South Africa, along with 13 other countries. Have closed more than 70% of the overall gender gap. We're looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, and Chad are the lowest performing countries with scores below 62%. Based on the constant sample, this marks a marginal improvement of 0.1% in terms of points. Additionally, women continue to face higher unemployment rates than men, with a global unemployment rate at around 4.5% for women and 4.3% for men. Even when women secure employment, they often face substandard working conditions. A significant portion of the recovery in employment since 2020 can be attributed to informal employment, meaning that women are not being absorbed into the formal industries at the rate that we would like to see. And it is, in fact, the informal employment industry where women are being absorbed. Out of every 5 jobs created for women, 4 are within the informal economy. For men, the ratio is 2 out of every 3 jobs. Women fare relatively better in industries such as customer services, retail, and education. And this is not a surprise, because oftentimes these industries are seen as more soft. They are seen as more feminine. And then when we look at industries such as construction, financial services, and real estate, these present the toughest conditions for aspiring female leaders, with a ratio of C-suite to entry-level representation of less than 50%. The proportion of women hired into leadership positions has been steadily increasing by about 1% globally. However, this trend shows a clear reversal starting in 2020, which brings last year's rate back to the levels that we saw in 2021. So we've seen a decline. Now, when we look at the McKinsey Global Institute report, it finds that Africa performs relatively well overall on gender inequality at work, with a higher than average labor force participation rate compared to the rest of the world. Additionally, while progress has been made at the top level of firms, women are less well represented in middle management and formal sector jobs more broadly. We also note that the report finds that African women are in leadership roles. African firms had the highest share of female representation on company boards. 25% compared to the global average of 17%. And I would have to say this looks really good. But I think what's also important is that as a change maker, when you're given information, is that you question the information that is presented before you, asking the critical questions. Whilst the report finds that women are in leadership positions and roles, what are their experiences in these leadership positions, or the environments inclusive? Again, we're going interrogating what is meant by gender equity in terms of the environment. Yes, we have women in leadership positions, but what are their experiences? Or are they able to thrive in these particular positions? Or is the environment inclusive? Is the environment conducive for them to perform at their peak? So sometimes when we presented with data, we also need to question the type of data that we are presented with, and also ask the critical questions. Additionally, women make up to 43% of those who receive a tertiary education, but hold only 28% of formal sector jobs. Again, here we see that there is a mismatch in terms of women who are qualified, women who can do the job in terms of university or tertiary education output, and the rate at which these women are absorbed within the formal sector.
Okay, Vuyisa, before we move to the next class, we have a hand raised from Kayumba.
Okay, go ahead. They may ask a question, or yeah. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at gender inequality within our organizations. So I think as a change maker, it is very important to recognize that we are all socialized into gender ideas. And this is based on how we grew up, looking at what we call socializing agents. These can be our family, religion, education, so on and so forth, right? And we also look at or ask questions such as, how do these permeate into a workplace and get reproduced? It's very important because when we enter workplaces, we come with our own ideas. We bring in our stuff. We bring in our biases as well. And it is very important to take note of the formal aspects of the things that we bring in and the informal aspects of the things that we bring in. But it's not only about the things that we bring into the organization. organizations have their own organizational culture as well. They have their own way of doing things, both formal and informal. And as a change maker, it is very important that you have this understanding in terms of how, as an individual, I relate to the organization, and how the organizational culture has an impact in terms of how I am able to do my job within the workplace. Additionally, organizations have been often mistaken and seen as neutral. And earlier on, I spoke about us holding particular positionalities, us holding certain powers and having certain privileges. And this speaks to the concept of intersectionality, right? That we are not all one thing. And sometimes organizations, once again, have been mistakenly seen as neutral, viewing people as holding one position. And this is not the case. Some people have more power or hold more power than others within organizations, and that does not make organizations to be neutral. Additionally, organizations swim in a sea of societal norms. Remember, organizations or a microcosm of our society. So they are greatly influenced by what is happening in the broader society. And then we have us, who are the employees, who also bring in our staff into the organization. And this, of course, influences how the organization operates. These visible and invisible rules recreate inequalities inside the organization and affect the services and products offered by the organization. So the actions, again, of individuals in an organization are shaped, once again, by their own attitudes and by gendered social norms. So there is a bi-directional relationship between employees and organizational culture. So it's not only, so when you step into an organization, oftentimes you know that an organization will have their mission and vision statement, that guides how the organization operates. And sometimes when you join an organization, you sort of study the environment and try and fit in and move at the pace at which the organization is moving, and adapt and allow yourself to be integrated to the mission and vision of the organization. So this is an example in terms of how the organization impacts or influence how you relate with the organization and other colleagues. But also you are not coming in as a blank slate. As I said earlier on, we come in with our staff. We understand gender in particular ways, and these understandings also have an impact on the organizational culture. So when we talk about a bi-directional relationship, it means that I, as Vuyisa, as an employee at the Center for Sexuality, AIDS and Gender, have an influence on the organizational culture. And the CSA&G, in terms of how I relate to my work and to my fellow colleagues, also has an influence and impacts in terms of how I do my work. Gender biases in organizational services can deepen gender inequality in the community. And then we have a look at the deep structure of an organization, the way it operates. And oftentimes it operates in invisible ways that reproduce inequality. And oftentimes one may find that there is resistance to change. And I think it's also very important that we touch on what causes resistance to change. We've spoken about the different positionalities that we hold within our organizations, issues around power, issues around privilege. And sometimes when we do this kind of work, it's often very challenging, right? And sometimes people who currently hold power find it very uncomfortable in terms of conversing and thinking deeply about some of the issues that this kind of work unearth, and that's deeply rooted in the deep structure. You know, these taken for granted knowledges, ways of being that are deeply embedded in all of us, you know, where we see the practice of discriminatory social norms, where people are treated unequally within certain organizations. And sometimes when you speak to power, people may resist, not only power, even colleagues. People may resist this type of change because they are uncomfortable. You know, sometimes when you hold power or a certain privilege, it's often difficult to let go. And this is one of the reasons why people resist, because they want to hold on to power and hold on to some of the privileges that they possess. Now, let's also have a look at the ways in which inequalities are created inside the organization. We have 4 key themes or areas that we're going to look at. The first one, we're looking at the organization of work. So how is work organized? Jobs are often developed on the expectation that work is separate from the rest of life and has the first claim on the worker's time. And again, with that, you ask yourself, who stands a chance of benefiting from this type of organization of work? Secondly, job classification and ranking, as well as career path structure. Jobs that are stereotypically female are valued less, paid less, and less likely to be a path to senior positions. Again, this speaks about the positionality that women hold in certain organizations. Now, let's have a look at recruitment, hiring, and promotion practices. When we look at formal requirements, here it may appear neutral but discriminate against women. Images within the sector or the organization of the ideal worker create biases. Personal biases influence the decisions of individual managers. And later on in the presentation or in the conversation, we will look at how these personal biases manifest within our organizations. Lastly, we have policy development and implementation. Sometimes policy development is not gender inclusive, or they are poorly implemented, or sometimes they fail to acknowledge gender equity. Now, let's look at how some of these biases manifest within our organizations by engaging with this particular scenario. So a manager confides in you, right? That I honestly find it easier to work with me. A manager confides in you that they find it easier to work with men. You may ask yourself, why does this matter, right? So your colleagues' preference for working with men could lead them to consciously or unconsciously overlook talented women because they hold this preference, they hold this view, they hold this bias. So when this happens, women can miss career opportunities, and your manager or your co-workers can, okay, sorry, not managers, but your co-workers can miss the chance to work with women from whom they might learn something. Just to go back, when this happens, women can miss career opportunities, and your co-workers or manager can miss the chance to work with women from whom they might learn something. And so one may ask, why does this happen, right? So your colleague may say this because of performance bias, which can lead them to incorrectly assume that men are more competent than women. So that we call or refer to as performance bias when we assume that men are more competent than women. It also happens because of the likability bias. This can lead certain people to feel that competent women are less likable and therefore harder to work with. And if your colleague is a man, his comment may be rooted in affinity bias. This is that he may prefer to work with people like himself. Next slide, Cedric. So if you find yourself in this particular position, what do you do? So a comment like this may signal that your co-worker thinks women are less talented or less likable than men. You can ask, what makes you say that? Because oftentimes when people are asked to explain themselves, it sometimes leads them to rethink their position. You could also go on to explain why this happens. The exercise can be eye-opening to your colleague or manager to understand how bias works, or share your own perspectives. For example, state that I've had great experiences working with women. Even if you can't convince your colleague to think differently, at least you can push back on their point of view. Next slide. Now, a question for the plenary. What do you think are the benefits and drawbacks of this approach? What do you think are the benefits and drawbacks of this approach? And the approach is really asking your colleague about a bias that they have, being critical about how they think about certain things, and then also sharing your experience in terms of working with women if they prefer to work with men. So in terms of pushing them to think about the bias that they hold, to think about the way in which they do things. And of course, you're not doing this in a confrontational way. You are very compassionate within your approach. So what do you think of this approach? What are the benefits and what are the drawbacks? Any thoughts? I know that we have alumni amongst us. Can you please share your thoughts? Okay, lovely. I see that we have a comment from Sipo. Sipo, lovely to see you. I think it helps on creating an understanding between both parties. I agree. An understanding between both parties. Anyone else?
Yes, I raised my hand.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Diana. I'm unable to see who has raised their hands on my side, but please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I think in an organization you can create inequalities when you are not having you're not balancing how things should be done. Like if you have issues to do with discrimination, it causes a lot of inequalities. And then if you don't respect each other's contribution or each other's ideas, like you feel maybe you're an organization founder, you feel like you are always right, like the founder is always right. So when you disrespect other people's opinion, you don't want them to contribute, I think this can cause inequalities. And also I think issues to do with traditional culture and beliefs, like you want people to believe in what you believe in. I've interacted with people who have got different beliefs, and because of having a wider constituency of people I interact with, I've come to learn that it is so important to respect people's boundaries. Like, do they believe? For example, there are people who don't believe in God. I'm a Christian personally. I believe in God. But there are those people who will tell you they don't believe. Maybe this is a person, like I came across someone who has lost the mother, the father, has lost all the sisters, like she's in this world alone. And then she tells me, God took my sisters, God took my mother, God took my brother. So if you start pushing this person to believe in what you believe in, so for me, I think that's why we even have rules and regulations, like a code of conduct on how you should operate in an organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Diana, for that contribution. Sipo, I also see that your hand is up. Please unmute your mic and share your response.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. So I think what I actually wanted to mean that I think in this context, one, in terms of understanding, that could also lead in terms of being misinformed or being misled, which speaks pertaining to issues of power dynamic in the organization. So on that saying is that it means that if one uses their power in terms of language approach or cultural approach, it can create other issues of making workers or co-workers not to fully function. So power dynamics is also one of the other key things. But I think in terms of now questioning, it will be a matter of, trying to create a safe space pertaining to the policy development that are in the company in order to respect each and every individual's human rights, but then just to make sure that there is a clear communication, understanding pertaining to the issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sipho. Greatly appreciate that contribution. Do we have any more contributions, comments, questions for clarity? Okay, if we don't have any more questions for clarity or a response to the broader question, I'll ask Cedric to take us to the next slide. So here we are going to look at wage setting and supervisory practices. So what work and what work styles are valued? And I think as a change maker, it's very important that you ask yourself these questions. What works or what is work, and what work styles are valued within my organization? Oftentimes, supervisors' biases can affect the support workers receive and how their performance is assessed within organizations. And this speaks to what Sipho have just brought up, the way in which power dynamics operate within organization. So, and sometimes these biases are influenced by the gender stereotypes that we have. And some of these things, again, are rooted in the stuff that we bring into our organization as a result of how we've been socialized or brought up in our communities. So in a study of performance reviews, and sometimes this is how that the stuff that we bring, the stuff that are deeply rooted in our being, also influence how we are viewed in terms of performance assessments within organizations. So in a study of performance reviews, what percentage of women and men received negative feedback on their personal style, such as you can sometimes be abrasive? Right? So we're talking about holding particular types of stereotypes, gender stereotypes. We are talking about people being assessed based on gender, because once again, of the things that we bring into our organization. Now, looking at this question between the two genders, which do you think received negative feedback on their personal style, such as you can sometimes be abrasive? Okay, so we see that 66% of women are sometimes told that they are abrasive. So they've received that negative feedback on their personal style, and only 1% of men received that feedback. And this again ties into some of the ways in which we have been brought up the gender expectations associated with women, and sometimes gender diverse individuals. And because of your gender, you are most likely to be in a position to receive negative feedback when it comes to performance assessments. Next slide. Also, we need to look at how we interact with each other, specifically some of the informal interactions, because some of the ways in which these inequalities are created, they are created and manifest in subtle ways. So these are ranging, once again, from subtle ways of excluding women to micro and macro aggressions and sexual harassment. So based on this brief reflection on gender equality, gender equity, and workplace culture, do you have any initial comments or reflections? Would you be able to articulate to a colleague in terms of the scope of gender equality within our societies and what we mean by gender equality and gender equity? The floor is open to take responses. Diana, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I think according to what we have learned this morning, it's still morning here, gender equality, gender equity, and workplace culture. One thing I would say, I have been in this field, I think this is around my 14th year in this space where I'm championing for the rights, because I work with widows. So I find out so many of their issues are issues related to everything that we are doing today. Like there is a lot of inequalities just because they are women. Even when it comes especially to the rights to inherit, because you're a woman in the African culture, it's like you're when a husband dies, death is a bad omen. You're the cause of death as a woman. I think in my line of duty, I found out it is true that the society really judges women so harshly. The workplace culture is another place I've found out. It's sometimes you have to fight for your space. And this is what I came to realize. I was appointed to sit in one of the board in the ministries in government. Then when I went there, we are two women. So there is this other woman who is above me age-wise, and then everyone is like, you have to serve us tea, you have to take minutes, and I said, no, I was appointed the way you were appointed. We are here to bring change in this space. And I am not going to serve tea. If you need tea, we have to create, that is a vacancy. I see a vacancy. We have to create a vacancy. And this vacancy has shown up very well that we need to employ another woman who can come then and do tea, because you want a woman, of which I also advocate for. We are going to bring another woman to prepare tea for us. And that's exactly what happened. I totally refused. I'm not serving anyone tea. This is not my kitchen. This is a boardroom. And this is where we fail as women. You are taken to decision-making tables. You go start serving tea, and then women issues are being discussed when you are busy in the kitchen. You stepped out, you went to bring something, like maybe they need more cups, so they are discussing about women, yet you have been there, like your work is like an overseer to oversight women issues. FGM are girls issues. How are you discussing girls issues when I'm not there? I'm the one who knows. I have I've stayed with women, I've stayed with young girls in my line of duty. I know what they go through. I am personally a woman. I know what I would feel if I'm taken through FGM. Then it became a very big conversation. So when you're talking about the workplace culture, I have seen it, and mine is just to encourage everybody in this class, men and women, because we need each other. Gender issues are not just women issues. There are issues where we need even men as our allies, so that we can have the women agenda move and the whole gender agenda move. So for me, I would say those are my comments. I have had quite a number of experiences here and there, but one thing that has really helped me, I have really stood firm. I've been called names, but I don't mind about the names they call me, as long as we get what we want. Because sometimes you find in these spaces, you're told, go do this. Maybe you're even told by someone, your phone is ringing, yet you have been seeing your phone is ringing. I know the reason as to why I'm ignoring that call. Maybe there is this heated debate on the table, and you just want to make a conclusion, so that when I come back, you're just going to read and you start saying, oh, these are the resolutions we made. You made the resolutions without me on board. So I encourage women, when your phone rings, unless something is on fire, like it's something you cannot ignore, you just leave that phone call. Otherwise, you leave the decision-making table. And that workplace culture, the negative culture of the workplace, starts to show up. So that's what I would love to add as my comments. And thank you so much. It was very informative. I'm so passionate about gender issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. You beautifully outlined and articulated some of the experiences of women within the organization. And I think also a takeaway from your contribution, you just reminded me of how we are all marinated in the structure, you know, of patriarchy. And I loved it when you said that gender is not only about women, but when we're talking about gender equity, inclusiveness, and gender equality, it is about all of us. So thank you so much, Diana, for that contribution. I do see that Pierre has his hand up. Go ahead, Pierre.
Thank you, Vuyisa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. I just wanted to reflect on Diana's intervention, if I may. Two things struck me. The first is that workplace culture cannot be divorced from the broader cultural space in which those workplaces are located. And so people bring in, I suppose, their beliefs and attitudes and practices into the workplace, and which is why this work is complex. So we have to, as you use the word marinated, we're marinated in our own systems that we grow up in, and we take those into the workplace, and that makes the work complex. And I think what I got from Diana also was the power of an individual's, a person who's done the work and is pushing back against systems of exclusion. But in some ways, that can become very oppressive for those individuals who constantly, as a single person, have to push back against the system, and why systemic and systematic change has to happen as well, so that the individual woman isn't placed in the position of burning out because she has had to push back against patriarchal systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pierre. Anyone else has a contribution or would like to comment on this question on the screen? Please do not be shy.
There's a comment in the chat from Sipo.
Okay, Sipo, can you please unmute yourself and vocalize your comment? I think it's just more lovely to hear different voices. Go ahead, Sipho.
Okay, please. Like me to speak and I don't want to speak. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I think what I have mentioned there, it's based on the sensitization on equality and inequality. They really need to be strengthened, especially in our organizations or in any work spaces. And I think the reason why I'm saying this is because I got promoted. Now I'm a human rights ambassador. So I do a lot of sensitization within workspaces where I address issues of inequalities that are happening. So with what we have spoke about pertaining to the workplace culture, it plays a deep, huge role because at the end of the day is that we come from different backgrounds. Probably other one will come from a background where there are issues of power dynamics, and then when they get into a new set of in a new company, they might expect the very same power dynamic system that they've used previously, but then now we are working in a different space where it allows each and every individuals, could be a queer person, could be a woman, or could be a man, where everyone they can do their work freely, meaning there is a safe space where each and every individual can be able to take in account on that. So in saying that is that I believe that for us in each of our companies, we can able to reduce the stigma and discrimination that is happening pertaining to the gender quality part, and also with the development of policies, because sometimes these policies, they are there, but they need to be practicalized, meaning if we speak about issues of religion and culture, that it should be on a practical sense, that whenever we write things down, we are able to take each and every individual accountable. And I believe with that, it will make work be much more easier and simple. And I think it starts at the small space, not on a cooperative side, you see. So yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm not going to speak. I will let others to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sipho. It's been a pleasure to listen to you speak. And I think my takeaway from what you said there is when you were speaking about being inclusive, including all types of bodies within the workplace. Creating these conducive environments, and also looking closely at the development of more inclusive policies and their implementation as well. Again, we cannot emphasize this enough, that our environments, our organizations, our workplaces, they need to be a space where everybody is able to thrive. And then sometimes we talk about including more women and diverse bodies within particular organizations, and a question that we do not interrogate enough, I think, is that you're talking about including me in this particular organization, but nothing has shifted about the workplace culture here. So I do not want to be included in an environment where certain individuals still carry particular biases when it comes to certain bodies. I don't want to be included in an environment where I'm not going to be allowed to thrive in what I do. So I think it is really important to look at the workplace culture, to really look at how a particular organization operate when we talk about inclusivity, and not just loosely use the term of inclusion and mark on our documents that we've included so many women in our programs, so many women hold leadership positions, without looking at the experience and whether the environment itself allows for women empowerment and development. So once again, thank you so much, Sipho, for igniting that thought process. Can we have the next slide? Now we are going to get into our second activity, where we pay closer attention to interventions on gender. So what have people who have been working in this place done thus far? Earlier on, when we were looking at the facts and figures, we acknowledged some of the progress that has been made in terms of accelerating our efforts towards reaching gender equality. So what do those efforts look like? What have people on the ground been doing? How did we reach some of the progress that has been made to date? So what do these interventions look like? So some of the approaches that have been used in terms of promoting gender equality in the organizations, we've looked at gender mainstreaming. Some people use what we call the gender climate analysis. We also have the gender at work framework. Later on in the conversation, I will speak in depth about the gender at work framework. And when we look at the gender climate analysis, I think it's quite clear in the name that here you want to understand the environment, you want to understand the climate of gender within your organization. And then when we look at gender mainstreaming, this of course involves the integration of a gender perspective into the preparation, design, implementation, monitoring and evaluation of policies, regulatory measures and programs with a view to promoting equality between women and men and combating all forms of discrimination. Simply put, gender mainstreaming means that including gender in all aspects of the organizational culture. And there's a joke that I often like to use, that there had been an uptake, of gender mainstreaming, and women started to feel that, it had lost its depth when we're speaking about gender mainstreaming, and now it was about gender mainstreaming. So instead of being inclusive in our approach, it was really about gender mainstreaming in terms of gender mainstreaming, because we're still seeing that in terms of integrating gender perspectives, men were still dominating in most areas of organizational culture. So we must please move away from that approach of gender mainstreaming and really go into in terms of gender mainstreaming, in being inclusive in our approach, in terms of including both women and men and gender diverse people, as well as combating all forms of discrimination. Now let's have a look at approaches to promoting gender in organizations. So we need to focus on individual behavior change. Here we're talking about attitude change in men and confidence building in women. Secondly, let's try to address the culture of a workplace, the training and development of gender champions. We also need to focus on recruiting more women, shifting the numbers balance. We also need to focus on policy development and change. We also need to focus on a single metric like equal pay. We also need to try to dig deeper into the hidden culture, the deep structure. And we will speak at length a bit later on in the conversation about the hidden culture and the deep structure in terms of how it manifests and operates. Now, going back to mainstreaming and the gender at work framework. So mainstreaming and the gender at work approach are more holistic in their approach in terms of organizational change and gender change within our organizations. They are holistic in their approach. Between them, they start to bring all of the above together. We also see a gender climate analysis as less of an approach, but more of a tool. Additionally, why is it useful for gender change approaches? Well, it is useful for gender change approaches to develop and facilitate organizational change in favor of gender equality. One needs to understand how organizations are gendered, right? So let's not talk about organizations being neutral anymore. Let's all recognize that organizations are gendered in particular ways and how gender transformational change can happen in organizations and in our communities. Now, let's have a look at the gender at work framework. What does it entail? So the gender at work framework offers a blend of the personal, systemic, and structural, and is a methodological and integrated approach to gender change. You will see that the approach is divided into 4 quadrants. At the top left-hand quadrants, we have what we call consciousness and awareness raising and capabilities raising. On the top right-hand corner, we have what we refer to resources in terms of what is it that needs to be done in terms of resources when we're talking about gender change. At the bottom right-hand side, we have laws and policies. There we look at the types of policies that needs to be developed. And then on the bottom side of the right-handed quadrant, we have social norms, the deep structure stuff, but I will speak about this in detail. Cedric, let's just have a look at the next slide. Okay, can we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. So I want to speak at length about the gender at work framework in terms of what is the framework and how we can use it. So what is the framework? The framework really, it's about uncovering the power dynamics. Again, I'll go back to Sipho when he spoke about how power dynamics operate within our organizations. So as a change maker, it is very important that you uncover, the ways in which these power dynamics operate within your organization, and how these power dynamics also keep certain ways of working that shape what we value, that shape what is normal, the kinds of values sometimes that are hidden. And for you as a change maker to try and make some of these things visible, because oftentimes these things are hidden and they operate in subtle ways. So what you want to do as a change maker, and what the framework allows you to do, is to make these types of things visible. The framework also is foundational in terms of how much change we are able to achieve. It is also not easy to work on these kinds of changes that are very subtle, changes that are hidden. But it is sometimes much easier to work on developing a policy or creating a gender unit within an organization, maybe to set up training. But those kinds of things may increase awareness, of course, of the issue, but do not necessarily help you discover what really needs to change for the power dynamics to shift. Because, of course, what we want to see is a shift in the power dynamics. So that you have more equitable allocations of resources, more equitable voice within the organizations. So it's very important to think about the way in which we can use the framework. Additionally, the framework is also a tool that helps you think about what needs to change. The framework highlights the different domains of change, where change needs to happen for transformation to be achieved. Again, when we looked at the first quadrant there, we talked about consciousness raising, awareness raising capabilities. So we may find that in my organization, people need more information. People need to more awareness when it comes to gender change work, right? Second quadrant, we're looking at resources. We need to be more intentional in terms of providing resources to develop policies, to host some of these interventions when we talk about training. Those are just two examples that I'm going to provide where change needs to happen. So again, we're talking about the quadrant, about the framework and the quadrants that exist, or the domains that exist. So again, the gender at work framework also helps change agents to once again uncover and challenge deep structures of inequality and discriminatory social norms. These can be formal and informal barriers to transformation. Once again, when you look at the right-hand side of the framework here, again, the right-hand side of the framework deals with the formal aspects of change and looks at things that are measurable. So the right-hand side of the things are formal things that are measurable. On the informal side of the framework, we look at things that are not necessarily obvious. This can't be seen and very difficult to measure, particularly the quadrant where we're looking at social norms. Some of the things that haven't shifted, or the things in the lower left-hand quadrant, these are the values, social norms, and discriminatory norms. And oftentimes we need to really spend time in working towards working on that quadrant if we want to see valuable change in the work that we do as change makers. Okay, just can you please give me. I don't know how I did this, but I exited. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now let's have a look at some activities one can run within their organizations, challenging gender stereotypes and inequalities within the workplace, using capacity building initiatives to empower employees and communities, negotiating policies to discourage all forms of discrimination, training supervisors to adequately handle reports of all forms of discrimination, respond appropriately, and refer to the appropriate structures. It's also important to run awareness-raising campaigns, developing anti-violence programs to combat GBV within the workplace, specifically sexual harassment, setting up safe reporting procedures, particularly for sexual harassment. Most women have articulated that oftentimes they do not report because they do not trust some of the structures that exist within their organizations. And sometimes they do not report out of fear of retaliation after they have reported incidences of sexual harassment. Also, what's very important is that we review our disciplinary procedures within our organizations. Now let's look at the kinds of changes that the program hopes to create within our organization. Is to increase the participation of women in the organization services as they currently exist, often by improving women's capacities. Secondly, treating women in the organization more fairly and or adding new services designed for women. So we need to be intentional in what we do. Challenging gender inequalities in power relations, rules and regulations, to have men as allies, challenging all forms of gendered social capital, revisiting childcare and family responsibility options. Now, let's have a look at the GEC program in terms of what it is that we are offering holistically. So what is our vision? What is the GEC program? Our vision is to improve agency within gender equality by building and mobilizing a league of gender equality change makers who champion projects within their organizations to reduce systemic gender gaps. It's not only acquiring the knowledge, tools, and skills, but it's also about doing the work. So doing the work entails that within the project, within the program, you will develop a project as a change maker that will help progress gender equality and gender transformative work within your organization. We provide knowledge, techniques, and tools to develop changes in organizational behaviors and attitudes toward gender equality while connecting students to peers in other organizations in their cities, in person, and further abroad in an online community. We target both women and men from private, public, and development sectors who are championing diversity in organizations, diversity in the economy, and diversity in the public sector and politics. Gender equity is an issue that requires systemic change. It is an issue that requires systemic change, because one of the reasons why we are experiencing gender inequality is because it is operating on a systemic level. And if we want to see individual change in terms of our attitudes, beliefs, social norms, and practices, something needs to happen at the systemic level. And if we can master changing what is happening on the structural and systemic level, then everything else will fall. Okay, so one of our key areas on the program is we value leadership support, because we recognize that as gender champions or change makers, you can't do this work alone. So leadership support is key and is very important to ensure that the work that needs to be done can be done. So leaders, so what we want in terms of leadership support is that leaders recognize the importance of gender equity and commit time and resources to address gender inequalities within our organizations, and that this gender work or gender change work is not seen as a peripheral work. Secondly, knowledge. Change makers, we want change makers to have sound understanding of key gender concepts and issues. Again, to do the work, you need to gain fluency in the language, understand what has already been put out there, so that you can articulate clearly some of your vision, your missions. And when you draw up your gender project, you need to have the language to speak and articulate what your project is about, what changes needs to be seen. So change makers have some understanding of key gender concepts and issues. Change makers to have sound understanding of gender mainstreaming and organizational tools and techniques. Thirdly, desire. We want change makers to be motivated to apply their knowledge to address gender equity and women's empowerment issues within their organizations. Also, ability. We need change makers to have the skills and practical tools and knowledge to spearhead gender equity change initiatives within their organizations. Once we have covered these 4 themes, change makers have the support and capacity they need to effectively lead and execute organizational change initiatives that promote gender equity and women's empowerment. Gender equality change makers should be able to influence the working culture of their organizations, therefore transforming them to become more gender intentional and equitable over time. Next slide. So what is our approach to curriculum development, and what does our curriculum look like? Dozens of courses on gender equality exist. These courses are predominantly micro online courses of only 1 to 5 hours in length without the support of class coaching or access to gender equality champions during learning. Students often are not engaging with peers that are taking training when they are exposed to gender challenges in diverse geographies. The curriculum often lacks important local context and is taught by specialists from developed countries. These factors result in a wealth of shared knowledge, but are unlikely to provide skills or tools to initiate or implement gender change project in the student's context. Next slide. So the Gender Equality Changemakers program mobilizes a league of gender equality champions across Africa through an immersive learning experience for professionals and leaders who are motivated to ignite change in their organizations. Next slide, Cedric. In a 13-week program blending self-paced and live online learning and engagement, leaders and change makers are equipped with the knowledge, attitudes, and practice they need to drive projects that can make a significant dent in gender gaps and inequalities at a systems and individual level. Our program architecture considers the tools that a student would need to become a change maker in their organization and together with peers in their sectors, while also considering the importance of leadership support and changing organizational mindsets. And I would like to emphasize the importance of leadership support. So I'm quickly just going through these slides because I'm mindful of the time that we have left. So please do bear with me, and also remember that this slide presentation will be shared with you as well. In most cases, senior level belief and endorsement are critical for change. For change to happen, the most senior officers will need to be intentional, willing, select a change agent, and perhaps allocate resources, even time aside to initiate or run a change project. Or students will need to be equipped with skills to sufficiently convince or influence these officers to endorse and affect change. It is a tall order, but it is work that needs to be done. And to be successful in this journey, you need to get your leaders buy-in. Now let's have a look at our courses. What do our courses look like? Change makers will need a history lesson that helps them contextualize why we are in the current unequal state. I like to say that it's not by accident that we find ourselves in these positions. It is because a precedent has been set throughout history that women and gender diverse people hold less power than men. It all has to do with living in a patriarchal system, and again, it is not by accident, but a precedent was set. So that's why it is important to understand history in terms of where we are coming from, so that we can contextualize why it is that we are where we at currently. Equally important, change makers need to be aware of where we are now as a global movement toward equality and what the vision for the future is. Change makers should then be equipped with skills and tools to initiate change projects. The Gender Equality Change Makers curriculum is delivered in 6 distinct yet connected courses that provide both depth and breadth. Okay, so we have, as I've stated, we have about 6 courses. We have the Leading Equitable Organizations course, and the duration there is 1 week. This course is aimed at leaders within organizations. And also what we want to do with this course is to really introduce the leaders to what the program offers and provide the leaders with skills, tools, and knowledge to better support change makers. And on completion, we're hoping that the leaders would have broadened their understanding of leadership knowledges, tools, and skills to assist in leading a more equitable organization. We then have the Foundations for Gender Equity, which is a 4-week course. Understand here, we hope that you would understand key gender concepts and have a holistic overview of gender in contemporary worlds. We also have Organizations and Gender. Here we hope that you will gain an understand gender in organizations, its manifestations, and our role in mitigating gender inequality in our organizations. We also have frameworks for gender and organizational change. Here, we hope that we'll have the knowledge of gender change frameworks and the ability to identify gender change interventions and actions. Practical tools for leading gender change. We believe both in theory and in practice. And we want you to deeply understand the theory, but also we want you to have the tools and skills to practically implement some of these interventions. Here, we hope that you would, after completion of the practical skills course, we hope that you would have gained the tools and skills to lead and influence others, as well as mitigating resistance. Lastly, we have the capstone project. Here, we hope that you as a gender change champion or agent will be able to identify the components of a gender change project, the role of a gender change agent, and develop a gender action plan that speaks to your context, that speaks to your workplace culture. We then have the community of practice, and we pride ourselves regarding these communities. So the communities of practice are valuable resources for sharing learning, as well as developing contexts and networks. The COPs can be a medium to showcase successes which can inspire others. They may be particularly crucial for change makers who have limited resources or support systems in their organizations. And I will have to say to you and encourage everybody who's on the program to join the COPs, because we do believe and value knowledge sharing, collaborating in how we work. Next slide. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining the masterclass. This is our contact information. I hope that you found it valuable, and after this conversation, that you would be better able to articulate and please persuade more people to sign up and join the program. It's been absolutely humbling and lovely to have engaged with you. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy your day further.